The Cybermen are one of Doctor Who's most iconic and enduring monsters. After their chilling debut in 1966, they quickly rose to prominence, becoming the most used villains in the Second Doctor's era. But just as the Daleks faded from the spotlight after the First Doctor, the Cybermen too vanished from regular appearances following Patrick Troughton's departure. The Third Doctor era brought a new wave of recurring threats, most notably the Master. However, while the Daleks eventually returned and regained their popularity in the 1970s, the Cybermen's comeback was far less impactful and far more forgettable. So let's take a look at why the 1970s Cybermen didn't work. Let's roll the clock back to the 8th of October 1966, when the Cybermen made their chilling debut in the 10th Planet. A landmark story not only for introducing one of the show's most iconic monsters, but also for debuting the concept that would ensure Doctor Who's longevity, regeneration. But the Cybermen weren't just background players in this pivotal episode. Their unsettling presence in the Antarctic wilderness, combined with the horror of their origin, once fully human, now gradually converted into emotionless machines, offered fans something new and deeply unsettling. This concept of body horror, fused with cold logic, struck a chord. Created by scientist-turned-writer Kit Pedler and then script editor Jerry Davis, the Cybermen were rooted in real-world fears about the future of humanity, rather than the fantasy origins of other Doctor Who aliens. Their grounded, sci-fi plausibility made them resonate deeply with viewers. Their successful debut paved the way for a dominant presence during the Second Doctor's era. The Cybermen appeared in 4 stories during Patrick Troughton's tenure, each one expanding their mythology and refining their menace. In the moon base, their design evolved into a sleeker, more mechanical look, complete with the electronic voices, making them eerier than ever. The Tomb of the Cybermen took us to their adopted homeworld of Telos, introduced their hierarchical structure through the Cyber Controller, and even added creatures like the Cybermats to their arsenal. The Wheel in Space continued their base under siege approach, a hallmark of the Second Doctor's era, and reinforced their strategic threat to humanity. Their 60s era arguably peaked with The Invasion, an ambitious 8-part epic that brought the Cybermen to present-day London. With help from their human ally Tobias Vaughan, they attempted a global takeover. The iconic image of Cybermen marching past St Paul's Cathedral remains one of Doctor Who's most unforgettable moments. The invasion didn't just mark the Cybermen's high point, it also foreshadowed the direction of the upcoming Third Doctor era. The story introduced units, led by the Brigadier, and shifted the series' setting more firmly to modern-day Earth, establishing a format that would soon become the show's norm. While the invasion introduced many elements that defined the Third Doctor era, such as unit and Earth-based threats, one major component didn't carry over into the 1970s. The Cybermen themselves. But why? There are several contributing factors. First, the original creators of the Cybermen, Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis, had left Doctor Who by this point, moving on to develop their own sci-fi series, Doomwatch. Second, the 1970s brought a new recurring villain, the Master. His charisma and cunning offered a very different kind of threat and became a central figure in the Third Doctor's run, dominating much of the narrative space once occupied by monsters like the Cybermen. Additionally, the early Third Doctor era was grounded almost entirely on present-day Earth. Given the Cybermen's nature and their opposition to humanity, any attempt to reintroduce them at this stage would have likely resulted in a near repeat of the invasion. Whereas the Second Doctor's Cybermen stories unfolded in a variety of locations and time periods, such as the Moon, Telos, Deep Space, offering rich expansions of their mythology, the earthbound format of the early 70s didn't offer the same narrative flexibility. And in that contrast lies the key weakness, the Cybermen's limited narrative range. Unlike the Master, who could adapt to virtually any setting or story type, the Cybermen were often confined to large-scale military invasions or horror-tinged survival stories. Even when the Doctor regained his ability to travel through time and space, the return of the Daleks in stories like Day of the Daleks seemed to take precedence. Aside from a blink and you'll miss it cameo in Carnival of Monsters, the Cybermen had effectively vanished. As quickly as they had become a central part of Doctor Who, they now quietly faded into the archives. By 1974, Doctor Who was once again entering a new era, one that had become arguably the most beloved of the classic run. With John Pertwee departing and both producer Barry Letts and script editor Terence Dix moving on, the stage was set for a creative reboot. Enter Tom Baker, an eccentric, unpredictable new Doctor. Behind the scenes, new producer Philip Hinchcliffe and script editor Robert Holmes were steering the show away from earthbound unit adventures and back towards high-concept science fiction, with a darker tone rooted in gothic horror and classic literature. It was a bold new direction, and with the Daleks already lined up for Genesis of the Daleks, it seemed sense to also bring back the Cybermen. After all, their absence had been felt since 1968's The Invasion, and the time now seemed right. To spearhead their return, Jerry Davis, co-creator of the Cybermen, returned to the show after more than 7 years. His original script, entitled Return of the Cybermen, had been commissioned by the outgoing production team, but it reflected a 1960s storytelling style that no longer fit the vision of the show. Therefore, Robert Holmes was heavily rewriting the story into what would become Revenge of the Cybermen. Revenge of the Cybermen was slotted into the Season 12 story arc, set aboard the space station Nerva, linking it with the arc in space and following on directly from Genesis of the Daleks. The Doctor, Sarah and Harry return to Nerva, only to find its crew being killed off by Cybermats. The Cybermen plan to use the station as a base to destroy the planet Voga, composed largely of gold, their greatest weakness. Unfortunately, Revenge of the Cybermen suffers immediately from comparison. Following the dark, complex brilliance of Genesis of the Daleks, it feels lightweight and unambitious. Although you could argue that's not entirely fair, as no story would really want to follow Genesis. But Revenge fails to expand or deepen the Cybermen in the way of Genesis of the Daleks did for the Daleks. The plot feels overtly familiar. An isolated crew in space, a traitorous human collaborator, and a slow build-up to the Cybermen's arrival. We've seen all these elements before, and better, in stories like The Moon Base or The Invasion. There's absolutely nothing new here. The Cybermen themselves are portrayed as desperate remnants, survivors of a past war, clinging to relevance. Maybe this is a reflection of where they disappeared to on telly, but this in itself could have been a fascinating angle. The Doctor sums it up by taunting them with the quote, "You have no planet, no influence, nothing. You're just a pathetic bunch of tin soldiers skulking about the galaxy in an ancient spaceship." This should have made them more dangerous. Wounded animals with nothing to lose. But the drama never lands. Tension is minimal. The script introduces the Cybermen too quickly and too plainly. The title gives away their presence, and their involvement is deduced by the Doctor almost immediately, removing any sense of suspense. If you compare that to their iconic reveal in The Invasion, you got a Cyberman bursting out of a cocoon and delivered a shocking cliffhanger moment. By contrast, Revenge of the Cybermen rushes its hand, and still, somehow, feels slow. Perhaps the most damaging blow comes from the portrayal of the Cybermen themselves. Their redesigned costumes, loosely based on the Invasion look, appear cheap and unthreatening, and even come complete with flared legs. Worse still, their robotic voices are replaced with flat human ones delivered by the actors inside the suits, stripping away that mechanical, emotionless menace that made them so iconic in the 1960s. Their behaviour is just as jarring. One early scene shows two Cybermen sitting down at a console. Why would partly mechanised beings designed for efficiency need to sit anyway? The cyber leader paces around with his hands on his hips, striking poses meant to convey confidence and authority. Again, why would emotionless creatures adopt such human body language? The humanisation of the Cybermen undermines their very concept. They no longer seem chillingly devoid of emotion, and just seem like men in silver suits. Given the long gap between The Invasion and Revenge of the Cybermen, you'd think the production team would have taken more care. All the ingredients for a successful return are mishandled. The story lacks originality. The tone doesn't match the gothic ambition of the Hinchcliffe era. The Cybermen feel diminished. The result is a rare misstep in an otherwise strong period for the show. Revenge of the Cybermen isn't the worst Doctor Who story, far from it. But sandwiched between two of the strongest stories of the classic era, such as Genesis of the Daleks and then other stories such as Terror of the Zygons, its shortcomings are painfully exposed. For a monster once seen as a top-tier threat, this return feels like a damp squib. In hindsight, it's easy to see how this happened. Holmes inherited a script that didn't reflect his creative vision. His rewrites feel dutiful rather than inspired, as if he'd rather not be dealing with the Cybermen at all. And that's perhaps what sealed their fate. The Fourth Doctor era featured memorable appearances from the Daleks, Sontarans, and the Master, as well as a whole host of original villains. But the Cybermen, after this failed return, wouldn't be seen again until the 1980s. The momentum they had built in the 1960s was gone, and Revenge of the Cybermen was that moment that slipped away. Today, the Cybermen stand once again amongst Doctor Who's most iconic monsters, but it's worth remembering how close Revenge of the Cybermen came to permanently damaging that legacy. After that story aired in 1975, the Cybermen vanished from our screens for 7 long years. Then came Earthshock. By the early 1980s, producer John Nathan Turner was steering Doctor Who into a new era, following Tom Baker's departure. To ensure the Fifth Doctor's era had momentum, Nathan Turner pulled multiple narrative levers: an expanded TARDIS crew, updated production values, fresh musical identity, and crucially, the return of classic villains. After successfully reviving the Master back in 1981, the attention then turned to the Cybermen. Nathan Turner remains a divisive figure in Doctor Who history, but his handling of the Cybermen's return was one of his most effective moves. Earthshock is dark, atmospheric, and unusually violent for the series. Just like the classic Second Doctor stories, the Cybermen's reveal is held back, allowing for the suspense to build, culminating in one of Doctor Who's most iconic cliffhangers. The story, set in Earth's future, centers on the Cybermen's plan to crash a space freighter into the planet, wiping out humanity and destabilizing its alliances. A classic cyber plan. We even see the return of familiar elements: a human collaborator, a takeover from within, and a methodical elimination of a crew. But where Revenge fumbled these ideas, Earthshock handles them with real tension and cinematic flair. These Cybermen feel threatening again. They're cold, brutal, and methodical, aided by their updated militaristic design and the booming voice of David Banks as the cyber leader. And although the Doctor ultimately follows their plan, it comes at a devastating cost: the death of companion Adric. It's a moment that shocked viewers and gave the story a tragic weight rarely seen in the show. The Cybermen were finally back. And from this, they would go on to appear in 3 more stories during the classic era. In the 5 Doctors, they finally had a brief but memorable confrontation with the Third Doctor. Attack of the Cybermen, a 6th Doctor story, was flawed in places, but still presented them as imposing forces. And finally, Silver Nemesis, their last appearance in the classic run, was a messy, overstuffed story, but their inclusion still felt appropriate, even if the script didn't fully utilise them. The 1970s were a blemish in the history of the Cybermen. Their solitary outing of the decade, Revenge of the Cybermen, showed as much of the blame, though, as I've said before, it's far from the worst Doctor Who story ever made. Despite its many flaws, it remains memorable in certain positive ways. For one, it holds the honour of being the very first Doctor Who story released on home video in 1983, a landmark moment in the show's fandom. The reuse of the Nerva beacon sets from the Ark in Space, transformed from sterile white to a more run-down grey, is an absolute clever idea and an effective bit of cost-saving, one that fits the tone of the story. And the location filming at Wookey Hole Caves in Somerset adds that eerie realism to the underground setting of Voga. The Cybermats themselves, often overlooked, are arguably an improvement on their 1960s counterparts. The new flatworm-inspired design, coupled with their ability to leap at victims and inject a deadly poison, gives them a deadly sense of menace. And while the Cybermen redesigns are a letdown, the decision to visually distinguish the Cyber Leader with a black helmet is a detail that has endured and continues to be used to this day. Tom Baker, too, still in his first season as the Doctor, demonstrates the magnetic presence that would define his time in the role. His ability to draw attention and carry the focus often helps mask the story's limitations, a skill who would deploy repeatedly through his tenure. So no, Revenge of the Cybermen isn't actually a total disaster, but that doesn't excuse the fact that it played a major role in diminishing the Cybermen's reputation. The question is, did it ever stand a real chance of successfully reviving the Cybermen's stature? Well, maybe. Under the stewardship of Philip Hinchcliffe and Robert Holmes, Doctor Who is about to embark on a dark and more horror-influenced tone. And yet, Revenge of the Cybermen feels strangely tame, a throwback to the past at a time when the show was evolving rapidly. A grittier, more atmospheric approach might have given the Cybermen the resurgence they truly needed. Instead, Revenge of the Cybermen ended up as a missed opportunity, a flat return from one of Doctor Who's most iconic villains. But fortunately, this wasn't the end of the Cybermen, just a pause. And when they returned in the 1980s, they finally brought back that sought-after menace and threat. But what do you think? Were the 1970s Cybermen a disappointment? Do you think Revenge of the Cybermen is a better story than I'm giving it credit for? Maybe it's your favourite Cyberman story. If not, what is? Let us know in the comments below. But for now, it's the end, but the moment has been prepared for.